coming to this chat, and I'm really looking forward to having this discussion with you all. So just jumping into it, we'll just start with what is fashion collection to each of you, and what is it that you collect? Whoever wants to go.
I was just on? Oh,
Yep.
cool, yeah. I guess for me, it's never really been like going out and intentionally collecting stuff. I think for me, especially with footwear, it's kind of like starts like when you're younger, you know, you want one pair or two pairs to go to house parties, go to clubs or whatever, and then eventually when you grow up and you get a bit more money and stuff like that, a bit more stability, and then you just start buying all the stuff you couldn't afford when you were younger, and then it just kind of eventually accumulates like that. It's never really been for me to be like, I'm going to buy this because it's going to increase in value in 5 years' time. It's just that I buy kind of what I like and what I liked in the past, and then sometimes it becomes more valuable, and then sometimes it doesn't, and then before you know it, you just got heaps more shit than you need.
And sneakers were always a passion for you from when you were young? It was always sneakers?
Yeah, I guess my parents used to dress me in all of like Nike and stuff like unintentionally when I was younger. I don't know if that subconsciously did anything to me, but I guess when I was going through high school and very much into hip hop and stuff like that, I think if you love hip hop naturally, then you love like sneakers and streetwear and stuff like that. So I guess just seeing kind of like all these people in like video clips and stuff, and that's kind of where you pick it up from. And then I guess when I was younger, a lot of my friends at the time worked at Foot Locker just throughout high school just to make some extra money and stuff like that. So they would also come to PE class in like the best stuff, and it would just be crazy.
Yeah.
So I guess that's probably where it came from, yeah.
Yeah, and then it was like 90s nostalgia.
So same sort of deal for me. So basically growing up as a 90s kid, being into hip hop, graffiti, skateboarding.
Yeah.
Just, you know, America was like so far away from us back then before the internet, and, you know, you'd only get to see certain things, and shoes wouldn't come out to Australia maybe a year or 2 years after the Americans got them. So you'd always see, you know, a magazine or something on TV, and you'd want it, and you'd have all these ideas of like how magical it is over there. And then when you could get something, you know, your parents would only probably give you like one pair of shoes a year or one skateboard a year, and you'd see other kids that are older than you with, you know, heaps of cool stuff. And then when you get older and you've got money and they start reproducing everything, you just start buying everything that you couldn't have as a child. And and all the brands started to bring back, you know, all the old shoes, and the skate brands would bring back all the old like decks and clothing that went with it, and it just sort of became, you know, an obsession. It wasn't about collecting, it was just about getting everything that you wanted as a kid.
Yeah, and financially being able to be
exactly, exactly. And then with the internet at its early stages in the sort of early 2000s, forums started to come up, and that way you could actually start meeting like-minded people from around Australia or your neighborhood around the world, where beforehand you went to school and it might have only been you and one other kid that was into it, and everyone else thought you were an idiot. Where you finally get online and it's like, oh, I'm not an idiot. Like, there's heaps of people that are into what I'm into, and that kind of fuels your addiction as well. And you get to see what everyone's got and what other brands had around the world too. So, because stores weren't selling online back then either, so you really relied on the community to help you out with what was available, and being able to hook each other up that way. So,
And the brands that you mainly focus on, that's like Cause and Supreme.
Yeah, so Cause and Supreme are probably the two that have become huge in the last few years, but it's mainly been skateboard, streetwear, sort of basketball brands. But Cause, being a New York graffiti artist, he started to get quite big in Japan, and that was when I first noticed I liked his art and his toys that he was making, and just started purchasing his stuff early. And with Supreme, I've known that was just a small skate store in New York that had some really cool skaters in the 90s, and they started to bring out really good quality 90s style clothing that was cheap at the time, and that was just another brand sort of that I could relate to as a kid. I was obsessed with Stussy, and it's a very similar brand, sort of similar story to how Stussy started. Same sort of ethos.
Developed on your obsession.
Yeah. So that's just how it all started. Yeah.
Cool. And Otto, with you, it's sort of like you are mainly focused on your one obsession.
Yeah, Comme des Garçons.
Yeah.
I also do Yohji Yamamoto, a little bit of Issey Miyake and Walter Van Beirendonck.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
for you, it was you've always just been passionate for Comme des Garçons. How did that sort of develop into what you're doing now?
It started with Walter and
Yeah.
then progressed to com after a trip to Japan.
Yeah.
But yeah, it became a business, and then that helped fund the
So-
collecting side of things.
Yeah. For people that don't know what those designers are, could you tell us a little bit about
Yeah,
Tom and Walter?
sure. Yeah, Walt got famous with his brand WNLT in the 90s.
Yeah.
And he kind of, I guess, he's famous for his rave scene clothing, digital print, crazy colors, over the top shows, and he's Belgian, yeah, and he's part of the Antwerp Six. Yeah, and so I was really attracted to color.
Yeah.
I guess I still am.
Really?
Yeah. And then through Walter, I kind of did more research and found out about other brands, the Japanese designers,
Yeah.
and kind of found out about them, went to Japan, and then just kind of got hooked.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it kind of got out of control. I just kept buying for myself
Right.
and then selling a little bit more to keep collecting.
Yeah.
And yeah, like now it's 3,500 odd pieces.
Yeah. Wow.
I can't stop. So,
Yeah. Do you have a favorite outfit?
No,
This
No.
one.
This one.
no, there's too many.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but my goal is more as a collector to have full runway looks. So I want to have looks from every show to kind of categorize a career.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my goal.
That's quite hard.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah,
Yeah.
you gotta know what you're looking for. You gotta always be hunting
Yeah.
to find those extra pieces that you're missing to complete a look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And Danielle, how? Oh,
Yeah, I guess I'm part collector. I wouldn't say I'm a full-blown addict like these guys, but because I work at a public institution at a state gallery, I look after a collection that that began in 1948, and I'm one of 6 curators that has cared for this collection. So some of what I have is inherited, some of it's things that I or my colleagues have actively sought out, and I guess our collection is so broad, like it numbers 8,000 objects. It covers kind of the story of the history of Western fashion. So there's things from the 18th century, things from this century. There's everything from hats and shoes to garments to fans. And so our kind of collecting remit is very broad, and it's also very deep. And so, I guess the approach is to represent, the major fashion moments and the major kind of artists or fashion houses within the story of the history of fashion. So what I'm looking for at any one time can be very different. For example, in the last month, we purchased, a group of things at auction, and, one was a Paco Rabanne mini dress from 67, one was an Alexander McQueen dress from 2002, and one was a Yves Saint Laurent, safari suit from 68. And so they're all very different ideas, very different kind of approaches, very different meanings. So I guess, for me, the approach is not like a singular approach like Otto has, or it doesn't come out of a passion for, a particular type of, garment like streetwear, but it's something that is about kind of what fashion means in a kind of larger sense, in a larger context.
yeah. Great.
My obsession with fashion really began following my mum around shopping in the 90s. And then that grew into the kind of teenage angsty self-discovery phase.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I got to experience in the flesh brands like Rick Owens in particular that I really found something I connected with. And then I think from then my collecting became quite selfish in that I only really like things that I really like, and I have to like the design philosophy behind them as well, not just the sort of surface level.
Right.
And I think that's why I'm continuously drawn to brands like Rick Owens and Song for the Mute and such. And then I think my collecting has just evolved from there based on being able to go experience those brands in the flesh
Yeah.
more and more. And I think that's why my obsession is quite broad across sneakers and other brands too, because I've just gotten to go experience those brands and I haven't bothered pursuing things that didn't interest me.
Right.
And I think that's why we were all talking earlier about this is like an Addicts Anonymous meeting, that we don't think of it as collecting with a specific direction. I know I don't. I know some of you, like you guys, are very specific, but I definitely find that I'm like drawn in different directions all the time, and it's just like following the passion for certain pieces as opposed to like an end goal.
Yeah. And with your store, King of the Jungle store, what kind of designers is it
So
targeting? Like quite a lot of different.
We like to sort of look at the design philosophies behind modern brands and
Right.
vintage pieces and sort of highlight a dialogue between the two. And that's why we stock vintage pieces, designer pieces from past seasons and brands that are like releasing new collections now.
Yeah.
And we like to kind of show how those things together have a dialogue that is relevant as opposed to being obsessed with new everything
Okay.
as well.
Yeah.
We find it quite cyclical, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So I guess speaking on that, how do you guys sort of decide what makes a fashion item a collectible investment? How do you decide and define what it is that you want to invest in?
Well,
Or what makes
you never really, you don't sort of set out to collect it to invest. Or personally, you're just collecting because you're really into it. You can relate to it, or it's something cool, or it's something interesting, or it's someone that you looked up to that did a collab with another brand, and it was interesting, and you want to purchase it. And some things end up, in time becoming worth a lot of money, and other things don't. It just depends who wears it eventually one day, and it just blows up.
Yeah, right.
Like one day, someone famous will wear one item of clothing, and then it just becomes huge. So, and other things that you think are cooler, personally, no one will ever, it just slips under the radar. So it's just a bit of luck when it comes to the monetorial side of it.
How long have you been doing it for?
Since about 2003.
And have you found that the internet and like social media and all of that has changed collecting for you?
Absolutely. So back then it was a community, like it was a controlled community. If you weren't really into collecting, or if you weren't really into a brand, you weren't really involved. Like everyone was real. And with the internet explosion, there's more fake people than there are real now. So, or the ones that see Kanye or Kylie Jenner wearing something and they all want it. And then the real heads sort of hide under a rock, and there's all these other people, monsters out there that are just paying crazy money for things, and it just got all crazy. So, the internet it was a gift and a curse. Like, it originally connected everyone together, and then it made us all run as well. So
it's like brands are decided by the internet now rather than a genuine.
Absolutely. And then obviously the corporations caught on, because it was very underground and niche, and it wasn't cool. Like if someone wore Supreme in the early 2000s, you would know them. Like if I saw someone walking down the street, I'd either know them or they'd be a friend of a friend. And now, and then you started seeing people, you're like, wearing it, and you're like, I don't know that guy. Like, what's he doing wearing it? And now it's just crazy. It's the opposite. Now we don't wear it. But we still keep it, and I'm still into it. But it's gone full 180. Absolutely. But look, at the end of the day, the real people know the real people, and there's still genuine collectors out there, and you've just got to ignore all the other noise that's out there. It is just weird because you are into usually you get into collecting things because it is a niche item and no one else has it. So to see things that you're into blow up the way they have is kind of crazy.
It's also that, like, when you talk about something being collectible or something that, as an investment, I think especially nowadays with sportswear and like kind of sneaker brands, it's like these brands will have you thinking that every release is going to be limited, it's going to be collectible, and it's going to be investable. So people will just buy like 10 pairs, and it's just dog shit.
The quantities are way higher now too.
Oh, really?
Because back then, especially with Supreme and all the collabs, the quantities were small. There was only a small market. There might only be 100 T-shirts printed, and now there's thousands.
So when something is released as limited edition, there's
Yeah, it's limited to 5,000 now.
And there could be 2 or 3 drops of that.
Yeah.
You know, like Kanye's stuff is like a prime example. It's kind of like, you know, like especially the news cycle and the media cycle is just going to have you thinking, being like, I have to get this, it's dropping this Friday, I have to get it. And then like 2 months down the line, they're dropping it again. And 2 months after that, they're dropping it again.
Right.
So it's just so hard to predict what's going to be valuable. That's why I think it's so important that like you just buy whatever the hell you want. And like, if it increases in value and you got a pair that's new in like 5 years' time and someone wants to buy it, great.
Yeah.
But you could be stuck with 20 pairs
Yeah.
in your closet and just have no money.
And,
that would also
and the
suck.
valuable stuff usually is the smaller quantity, the stuff that slipped under the radar 10 years ago. That's the stuff that's worth money because no one else has got it. All the stuff that everyone's buying, the price might go up for the first couple of years because everyone wants it, but then eventually it drops down again because there's so much of it.
Yeah.
And it's those pieces that were only really genuinely were limited are the ones where you actually do make money.
Right.
And for us, I suppose, the reason we sell as well as buy is just to fuel the habit. So if we've got a hookup and we can get a few extra pairs, we'll buy them purely so we can buy more, not to make money.
Yeah.
Like, but there is a whole scene now of kids that purely just do it to make money. They're not actually into it for what it is.
Yeah.
So that's where, and nowadays, you know, you used to want to work in a sneaker store or a clothing store as a kid because you got hooked up. Now, the kids that work in clothing stores, they can't even buy things themselves because the companies know it's worth more money on the street. So it's kind of gone the other way now. It's crazy. Yeah.
And Danielle, I guess for you, it's quite different coming from having sort of like that
It's completely
museum.
different because whenever we acquire something, it's forever and ever. It's never going to go back on the secondary market. So for us, you know, what we're looking for is also quite different too. Sometimes it's about filling a gap in the collection. So if we don't represent a key or an iconic work by a particular designer, then we've also always got our eyes peeled on the kind of auction market or talking to dealers or talking to fashion houses about what's in their archives to try and fill that gap. Or it's about kind of looking at a very contemporary from a very contemporary perspective about what's happening on the runway, what is the thing that defines this fashion moment. And that's about kind of knowing as much as you can about the industry that you're in, so knowing, you know, why that particular collection has meaning, you know, over the one last season, or, you know, who's doing the most interesting work. But yeah, so the decisions we make are about kind of thinking, is this object going to have value in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years? And also we collect with a view that we don't just want a singular object. So for example, if we're, you know, talking about Balenciaga at the moment or whatever, then they're a fashion house that we hope to represent, you know, with more than one example over time. So it's a bit, you know, a bit like Otto, you know, you're collecting so that you can tell a bigger story about what somebody's doing and why it's important. So that's the kind of investment. And for that, you need to build relationships with houses, with designers. You need to be talking to them because nobody's going to give you anything.
But you must find it easier to gain or access those pieces because of your having that sort of educational support, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's yes and no. I mean, there's great value in being in a museum. And if you're exhibited, prices rise. Like after the McQueen show, you know, there was so much McQueen on the secondary market, and the prices were really high. And now that, you know, a few years have passed, prices are coming down again. And so, you know, it fluctuates. And I think that's something to be aware of if you're collecting. Like if you can bide your time and, you know, wait for the right thing to come up, then, you know,
What is sort of the process for you guys to gain the best pieces that you can get? Like, how is it that you do that?
For us as a store, we work with a lot of collectors who consign to the store, and I guess for us, it's about them selling something they loved to someone who's going to love it as much as they did. And I think that goes back to where a lot of collecting drew from, like you collect what you really like and feel connected to. But I think there's a flip side to it now where looking back on things, some pieces of fashion especially define the moment in time that they're from, and the nostalgia you feel thinking about it in the future only gets stronger with time, and that's where part of the investment value comes from.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of pieces that fall into that category. But for us, we also see the kind of the cycle of how things come back into fashion, and
Yeah.
we like to show the way a vintage piece has a modern context again. And I think that changes from being niche across collectors appreciating it to being more mainstream when it comes back into fashion.
Okay.
So we like to show that dialogue, I think.
Yeah. With opening a store, is that sort of something that you had to have behind you before you decided to open it? Like having sort of this
I think
family of...
we built a collection first on
Right.
a personal basis,
Yeah.
and then we started to sell things as a way of moving forward
Right.
and continuing the obsession, essentially,
Yeah.
true addict status. And I think from then we just started meeting more and more like-minded individuals and collectors and
Yeah.
sellers and such, and that's just how it grows organically into
Right.
a community. Yeah.
Is that sort of the same for you guys, like having a...
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
I think you have your, if you're a collector, you're collecting anything, you have your network. So you'll have, people that you go to, so other collectors or specialist dealers, auction houses, eBay,
Yeah.
whatever it is. And then you also have those moments which are completely serendipitous, where somebody you've never met before calls you up out of the blue and says, I saw this thing on TV, or I'm cleaning out my grandma's house, and, that's the really wonderful and unpredictable aspect of,
Yeah.
I guess, being a collector is somebody says, oh yeah, there's this guy, you should contact him. He's really into Supreme
Yeah.
or Com or, yeah.
And you meet a lot of like-minded people throughout your career
Yeah.
of collecting, and you become really good friends. You have really tight friendships with these people, and they're all over the world, like all types of different people. Like, they're not similar, but they have that one thing in common, and that's the beauty of it as well.
Yeah.
And because they're so passionate about it, you are looking out for each other, and they might be into a certain aspect of the scene that you're not into, but so you can help each other out with certain items of clothing or things that you might appreciate, but they're not particularly what you're looking for, but one of your mates that might be into it. So
Yeah.
that's sort of how you help each other out too. It is a big community.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And then there is that other side of hype,
Right.
and that sort of comes and goes.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can see through that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And with you, Otto, with Com, you had access. Do you still have that relationship, like gaining those runway looks?
Yeah,
Can you tell us about that sort of?
yeah. So I'd go to Com in Japan.
Yeah.
and
Is that something that you were invited to because of?
Well, it started just because I was buying directly from the company,
Right.
and then over time they tightened their, I guess, who they wanted to sell their runway looks to.
Yeah.
And so they stopped selling it to the public, and they'd only sell it to their best customers. And
Right.
so I was one of a few, and they kept selling it to me if
Yeah.
I wanted to buy it.
Yeah.
And now, this year, they've stopped altogether, and they're not selling it to anyone.
Yeah.
So I got them while I could, but
Yeah.
yeah.
How does something like that continue if they're going to stop? Like, how will you gain those from now?
No one has them. Only Com. They won't sell them to anyone.
Oh, right.
No. So it's finished.
Okay.
So they just store them now.
They just,
Archive.
yeah, they'll have their own personal archive, one of one, the runway piece, that's it.
Wow.
But yeah, I've got the ones from
Cool.
the previous
That's all that
collections
So that
where they were
almost will
selling.
make them worth more money.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. Because there's only a few in the
Yeah.
world of each one, because they,
Yeah.
yeah.
For you guys, do you have sort of individual influences or inspirations other than the designers that you collect? Like, what sort of made you all decide to get into this?
Well, for me, it was being a kid and looking at skateboard. It was skateboarding,
Yeah.
graffiti, basketball, Americana 90s. So it was just looking at what they were doing, what they were wearing,
Yeah.
and just emulating what they were doing.
Mhm.
Skateboarding is a big part of streetwear fashion. Most fashion comes from skateboarding.
Mhm.
Like a kid, no skateboarder wants to be the same. The beauty of skateboarding is always evolving, just like art. It doesn't
Yeah.
stay the same. There's always new tricks. There's always, so the fashion, kids don't want to fit in. It's not about not conforming.
Yeah.
So you always sort of look at what the skaters are doing, what they're wearing, and that starts trends. And
Yeah.
that was a big influence on me in the 90s.
Yeah.
So just wanting to to emulate your heroes when you're a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
it, for sure.
And for you, Dania, how was it? What sort of made you, I mean, I guess you coming from museum, you kind of get a bit...
I mean, I guess everybody on this panel loves fashion. You know, we just love different aspects of it. And I guess for me, the thing that drew me to working with fashion in an arts context in a gallery is that it's kind of like the ultimate show and tell. So while collecting and acquiring work is a big part of, you know, my day-to-day, the other part of it is making exhibitions, telling stories, like the interpretation of it. So seeing fashion as a kind of a cultural expression, a political statement, whatever it is that, you know, like you talked about, you know, for you it's like, it's about an emotional relationship to the clothing, you know. So that's what I enjoy about it as well. So that's, I think, what keeps me in this particular role is that I get to sort of, do the show and tell. And there's all the detective work. There's the searching for those pieces. It's like, you know, the thrill of the chase, you know. And the learning and the research. So, I guess that's
that whole process just continues to motivate you all.
Yeah, and it's always changing. Like it's, you know, it's a creative art form, you know. It's like sculpture, like painting, whatever. There's,
Cool. Turn my page. Just going on to like moments and stories during this whole journey for you guys. Like, do you have any pretty wild stories or particular people that have sort of you think are exciting?
Yeah, well, for me, some of my closest friends I've met through eBay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like,
real, son.
so you know, originally there wasn't really, if you wanted to buy stuff that wasn't in Australia, you pretty much had to buy it on eBay. There was no online stores. You couldn't really trust people, so eBay was a kind of a secure way, and everyone was buying and selling on that platform for my type of interest.
Yeah.
And there was this one guy in San Fran that was a similar size to me, and he'd post things that he was selling, and I'd post things I was selling, and we'd always be buying each other's products.
Yeah.
And like kind of ripping each other off. And you know, you'd message each other and you'd ask for better prices, and then eventually you'd start talking, and then one day we're like, let's just hook each other up. Like, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Because, you know, Australia would get things that America wouldn't, and vice versa. And he had friends that worked for Supreme and Undefeated and Nike, and I had friends that worked in all the stores in Melbourne, and there were certain shoes that wouldn't drop in America, and vice versa. So we just ended up hooking each other up, and eventually I went over and met up with him, and we went all around America together, and I've been friends with him ever since. So, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, the bromance.
And I know, Danielle, you mentioned there was some sort of crazy Barbie.
Oh yeah, there's that about passionate collecting. But I think one of the thing that always sticks in my mind about like that kind of is that the sort of the dedication and the behaviour that's required of a collector. And you know, so there's great moments in your career, like, you know, there's the sort of, as I said, the serendipitous, someone calls you and you get this amazing thing, or there's the, like, you know, for example, you know, we had the opportunity last year to work with Dior to buy a couture look straight from the runway for the exhibition that we did, and you know, that's kind of an amazing thing, because when am I going to be able to, I should stop doing that, be able to afford a couture garment myself? Never. So that experience was really special. But back in 1983, my predecessor in the department was on a tram going towards Glen Iris, which is just a little suburb in Melbourne, and she spied a 17-year-old punk, and she approached him and said, I want to buy this, you know, your outfit. And, you know, and years later I was corresponding, because we were putting the outfit on display, and I had no idea about the kind of the history of the garment or how it came into the collection. And, you know, James emails me and he said, I was on the tram and this little grey-haired lady came up to me, and she was very polite, and she said, I'd like to buy your jacket. And I just think that's the kind of mindset that's required if you are a kind of collector, is like, it's about kind of knowing that thing that you want represents something kind of greater, and seizing the opportunity, and also having that radar that it is just about like, putting it out there and looking for things in the most unlikely places. And so that always kind of sticks with me about, what you need, the kind of skill set you need if you are going to collect and invest in, in fashion.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And Matt, I know you sort of spoke on like a more personal story about going to Japan, about that sort of inspiring you to...
I think Japan's an interesting place to go hunting for clothing or sneakers or anything you're looking to collect, because the Japanese very much embrace their mania and obsession to the point where when you go over there, even with the language barrier, there's this incredible connection you can create between someone over there that you might meet from spotting them in a crowd wearing some random thing that only you might spot because you have that same obsession.
Yeah.
And the way you can like connect when you don't even speak the same language and then be taken to some random suburb of Tokyo to see some little hole in the wall store you never would have found is very special. And I think it's definitely part of where my and my partner's obsession with hunting down vintage pieces and collecting came from a trip to Japan. And when you discover that there are whole suburbs of like tiny stores that you just can't find on Google, you can't like ask someone in the street about it, you have to just like walk and hunt for it, you really know that you're like into it and you're willing to like walk kilometers and kilometers to find things and such. And when you can like, pick something up in one of these little stores and be so excited, and to see the owner get just as excited as you are that you've connected with that piece, that's really, really special.
Yeah.
Japan's definitely the mecca when it comes to streetwear collecting as well. They're always ahead of the game, and they don't do things by halves. They'll buy multiples, and it's all brand new, and
they live their obsessions.
They're insane.
Yeah.
It's like going to Disneyland for us. Like,
Right.
especially like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, before it was quite popular for people to go there now, but it was just insane. You just couldn't believe the amount of stock they have and things you'd never seen before.
Yeah.
And it's just they became the influencers. They were the ones that were looking at America and idolizing that 90s culture, but then they just took it to another level, and then we started looking at what they were doing.
Yeah.
And that was definitely what got me back into collecting, was looking at what the Japanese are doing as well.
Yeah. What's like the craziest thing you guys have seen anyone collect?
Ooh.
Or what do you think is?
The craziest thing.
Now I'll jump in with my Barbie
Oh, yeah.
story. So we have a really amazing collection of early Vivienne Westwood pieces from, the 80s in our collection. And they came into the collection because we had an exhibition back in 96, and a young guy came in to see the show, and he was like, he came in to see the gallery, and he saw the fashion show, and he said, I didn't realise you collect fashion. I'm in town for a Barbie convention because I collect Barbies, but I have this collection because I used to work for a hairdresser in Perth, and I used to buy all this Westwood, and he'd lay by it. He'd purchase it. There was one store that kind of sold Westwood, and he'd lay by it, and he had all his dockets, which were like $50 at a time, paying off these pieces. And who knew? But it's this kind of, I thought it was really interesting that the obsession for collecting was there, but the focus of his collecting had shifted, and so he was happy to let go all this great fashion stuff because he's now into Barbies. But food for thought, Otto.
I think the internet really exposed that too, that people had private collections and obsessions back before it was so accessible to find other communities of people around the world that were as obsessed with you on the internet. And I think that was very private, and then it became much more opened up once you could start, looking overseas by just through your computer to find more. And that's when people became discovered, that you would never realize. You're looking at someone on the street, you would never realize some of the collections they have and their obsession.
And I guess with the internet as well, it's so much easier to find more things to become obsessed with and collect.
And you can find those like-minded people. You could be into the weirdest, most niche thing, and you'll find another 100 people that are collecting it.
Yeah.
So that's also a a really good thing about the internet too.
Yeah.
Sort of.
For me, it's very personal. Though. Like, I don't even like to share it.
No.
I collect for myself.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's it.
And that's
like,
that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were sort of speaking on that before, how because it is so personal to you, and that is, you know, your store, that store, and the pieces that you have are so personal. It must be sort of hard letting that go.
Yeah. So I don't let them go.
Yeah.
The pieces that
Yeah.
are special to me, I keep.
Have you guys ever regretted anything that you've? What have you regretted?
So many regrets.
What's like the biggest regret?
So many. Just stupid things.
Yeah.
Like just T-shirts. You know,
Yeah.
like I had thousands of T-shirts, and just how much they're worth now, and how just little things like that. I mean, you can't keep everything. And I've had regrets. They're not regrets, but they're just like, oh damn, look what that guy's got selling that for now, or you know, and you can't afford to buy it back anymore. Where at one stage you're like, I'll be able to get it again if I need to, and then it's gone.
Yeah.
So they're the regrets. But there are, as you said, there are pieces that you just never sell. They mean too much to you personally.
Yeah.
Like you do get a real attachment to some items because they mean something to you. There's a certain time in your life, or it was a person that, or an artist that a collaboration with an artist, and it was just like the perfect collab because you liked his work and their work, and they did something together, and it's like, wow. And that happens quite a lot too, and you're like, oh, it's amazing. I never thought those two would do something. It's like the dream collab, and it just means it's just too personal to give up. So
I feel like it would be really hard with the process of how hard it is to actually get specific items to then sell them. Must be really hard sometimes too.
Yeah, but I feel like collecting, I don't know, for me at least, is kind of like you have surges and then you have kind of like just down periods and stuff, and like during a hectic surge, like fucking, you'll do like the most crazy mental gymnastics. You'll be like, oh, I didn't drink last weekend, so I can spend money on this. You know, like I don't do heroin, so I can buy this sort of thing.
Exactly.
And then you'll take a pair home, and then your girlfriend or your mum's gonna be like, oh, is that a new pair? And you'll be like, oh no, that's heaps old. What are you talking about? Like,
and sometimes you get in over your head because there's opportunities, and you think, you know, how many 2-minute noodles can I eat this week? You know, if I buy that, I'll be all right.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you got to let things go because you've just gone too obsessed.
Yeah.
But sometimes it just gets like you have so much stuff. It just like I just get real bad anxiety about it, and I just like fuck it. And I'll just sell. Like I'll spend a whole week just selling, and then like 2 weeks later I'll just calm down. I'll be like, oh, I kind of want that again.
Yeah, and especially with some of the brands that I collect where they just exploded and it was everything that I hated happened.
Yeah.
And so I was sort of a bit jaded for a while too, where I was just like, oh, I'm over it, this sucks.
Yeah.
Get rid of everything.
Yeah.
And then like a year later you're like, oh no, I kind of want to be back into it again.
Yeah.
It's kind of a bit of a battle where it was a battle because it was something I'd never experienced before, and now I've just learned to sort of ignore what everyone else is doing and just hang out with and just communicate with the ones that are really into it.
Yeah. Yeah, your guys' personal wardrobes must be like pretty wild.
Yeah, girlfriend's not too happy about it.
Be interesting to see.
Yeah. Shoes.
Just where everything is at with like, what do you see or want as the future of collecting, and how do you believe it needs to change for it to sustain or develop? Like, for this being a career for you guys, and for, you know, the whole financial talk of young people not being able to buy homes. Like, what's your view on this lasting?
It's pretty crazy. You see, like, you just walk around, like, anytime you walk. Last time I went to Melbourne, actually, was crazy. Just walking around, fucking, I don't even know what street it is, but like, you'll see like 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds wearing like thousands of dollars of clothes, and I'm kind of like, when I was 16, I was working at bloody 7-Eleven or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't.
Yeah.
So it's pretty crazy. So I just feel like, I mean, it's always good to have a habit, obviously, but I feel like at some point financial responsibility does, and I know that like none of us here can talk, but like, you know, there's got to be a limit. There's got to be a limit to where you kind of just say, hey, like, I should probably just like kind of look after myself for a little bit.
It's become very, like, the big corporations have sort of latched onto it, and it's become very mainstream and very much controlled by bigger machines, where the things that we were into were very small, niche brands, just mates doing things, cool stuff together, and it wasn't ever something to make millions of dollars. And a lot of these brands you know, they've just seen that streetwear's become quite mainstream. It's just what everyone wears as their daily clothing now. So
Right.
the corporations have just thrown huge money into all these artists or designers and mass-produced. So it's always best, I think, for the future. It's just there's always going to be the small guy. Like there's, you know, like a local skate store like Passport in Sydney, like it's a skate store that does really cool, really good boards, good clothing. It's got a following. It's real. They're doing it. They're all friends. So there's always going to be a community of people doing something smaller.
Yeah.
And that's what you sort of tend to, you know, one day it could be worth a lot of money. But just always buy what means something to you. Really,
Yeah.
don't follow the hype. Yeah. Just if you like it and you enjoy it and it means something to you and it's real, then yeah, do it, buy it, enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same.
Yeah. But in terms of it being a career and financially,
Yeah, it's a tough thing to have as a career right now because everyone's a reseller. Like,
right.
and most of the resellers are 12-year-old kids, like using their mum's credit card, saying, "Hey, mum, if I buy this, I'll make this much money," and then you put it back in your credit card, and then I'll have this pair of shoes.
Yeah.
So there's thousands of people that think they can make money
Right.
off the industry at the
Yeah.
moment. So, as I said, I think it's best to look for the people that are doing below the radar, that are doing cool things.
Yeah.
And maybe invest in that. And you could, at the moment, it's impossible. Like, I can't even get hooked up anymore. Like, I used to be able to walk in and buy things a day before they released because I knew the guys that worked in the store. Now I can't do that because they're not allowed
Right.
to even buy it themselves. So,
Yeah.
and you've got a line of kids outside that wait 5, 6, 10 days, camped out for something to get released, and then they just put it on. They sell it the next day online. So,
But that's also a pretty financially stupid model because it's like,
yeah,
if you resell something for like $300 but you waited 6 days in line for it, it's like $50 a day. It's just
yeah,
pretty
but they're
bad,
kids.
but-
They're only 12 years old. You know.
Yeah, but you skip in school. That's also bad.
Yeah, absolutely.
should
I
be
mean,
skipping
they also pay homeless people to line up too. Like,
Yeah, crazy.
it's that crazy. Like in New York, in LA, they're paying homeless people to line up and give them $100, and
Yeah.
it's gone crazy.
Yeah, it's just turned
It's
into
gone
like a
out
whole,
of control.
yeah.
So I feel like it will die. There'll be a generation maybe below the millennials that will revolt against the internet and the Instagram and all about me sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then they'll start doing cool stuff again. It goes in cycles. It happened at one stage with streetwear in around 2007 where it just got nasty.
Yeah.
And then the financial crisis sort of killed all those brands and it started again. So it goes in cycles. I feel we're kind of at that crazy cycle again in
I think we're
In
close.
streetwear.
I think we're
Yeah.
close to the hype
we're,
bubble
we're very close to it
popping in a way.
Yeah.
and then some cool shit will come
because
out
of
of
the
it.
way you can access things.
It just needs those bushfires every 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you guys see it popping though? I just feel like with the internet and the way things are.
I think there's a bit of a equalization happening because I know a lot of young resellers rely on techniques like bots and paying for people in line and such, and lines are disappearing because of how much trouble can happen in that situation. So
Right.
companies are starting to move to specific apps and programs
Yep.
to handle it. And at first, bots can be used to get things in front of other people, but it gets to a point now where everybody has the bot. So it puts everyone back on a level playing field.
The site
And
crashes.
yeah, and people spend more money on the bot than they can make on the release, and then it starts to, I feel
It's
like,
just become too corporate.
Yeah.
There's no community
think-
in that.
I think a lot of people are going to lose money and leave the game
Absolutely.
a little
And
bit,
these-
and it'll level out a little bit again.
The ones that are buying it now aren't really into it. They're just wanting a photo on
Yeah.
Instagram, and they'll probably sell it the next day.
Yeah.
So that just needs to disappear. It'll happen.
Yeah.
But as I said, there are still people doing cool things. You just got to ignore all the noise that's out there
Yeah.
and look for people that
coming
are real.
Offline is where you see.
Coming
the-
offline for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Going back to community again because that's the best part of it.
Yeah, that's where it started for you,
Yeah.
like with those early blogs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Community, and it will happen, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In regards to what I do, if you do your homework and you know enough stuff, you can still get bargains no matter what,
Exactly.
because you know so much more than the guy next to
Yeah,
you.
and what you know and what you're into is not what they're into anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
They're into the flashier stuff, like so people know what they're wearing. We're into the real niche, weird stuff that no one else knows about.
Yeah.
So I guess there is still excitement in it. It's just that the landscape's changed. There's just so many more people that know about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if it's something you're genuinely passionate for and just genuinely interested in,
Yeah.
Then you know what you're
Right.
looking for.
It's the only way to consistently
Yeah.
fuel the energy required.
It's just
Yeah.
changed the way that we go about it. It's just,
Yeah.
it's constantly changing.
Just on a side note, for you guys, like, what is like your dream collectible item right now? Like, what is it that is really?
You would definitely
I
have
think
a few.
Otto knows.
Yeah.
The Tom Degas on runway look. That's what I want.
A few of those. Probably like an iconic look from '97 Spring Summer
Yeah.
comp. That's for me.
Is there anything that you guys really ever want but can't access or haven't
Well,
got?
Supreme brought out a pinball machine recently, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But there's no way I'm going to ever get that. It's just ridiculously
Like,
expensive.
what's the price point for something?
Oh, it's probably like $60,000 now or something.
Right.
Like, they only made 100 of them, but that was cool. I mean, I wouldn't mind. I'd like it.
Yeah.
but-
What is like the most expensive thing you guys have ever been able to?
Well, it's never been. It's expensive now, but it wasn't expensive when I bought it.
Right.
So, I mean, I bought T-shirts that were $30, and now they're worth $5,000. Like,
Is
Yeah.
that Supreme?
yeah, just the Supreme, and I've worn them, and I've partied in them, and
Yeah.
and they're still worth.
value.
And yeah, they're still worth
And
$5,000.
people,
I find
and people-
Absolutely, yeah.
Vintage T-shirts are very much epitomized
it's
by that
insane.
because when they were
It's insane.
purchased, they were so cheap.
Absolutely.
Like Snoop
I
Dogg
mean,
T-shirts.
we would cringe at spending $100. If you spent $100 in the early 2000s on a T-shirt, you were like, ugh. And now kids are dropping $4,000 or $5,000 on T-shirts. It's
Yeah.
crazy. It's crazy. And it's just a T-shirt. It's just a plain screen printed T-shirt. Nothing special about it.
Yeah, right.
But it's just old and rare. Yeah, it's wild.
That is wild.
Yeah.
T-shirts definitely have the wildest markup, I think.
Wild.
Yeah.
Because they don't age well. Like they age well, but then they die. They
Yeah.
fall
Yeah.
apart.
In your store, like, is that what you would find that you would mark up most?
I think
like,
we
easily?
consciously try not to mark up like to online prices because we find that too inflated.
Yeah.
And we'd rather someone enjoy it. But there's definitely a mark. It's hard to get those pieces now because the value of them is so well known.
Right.
And they're essentially like, it's not just that it's limited supply, it's shrinking supply because if they're being worn, they're wearing out to the point of being unsellable. And I think that's why the dream in hunting for vintage is finding untouched, like caches of pieces. Like
Yeah.
you dream of finding a warehouse that was a store owner from the 1980s or
Totally.
70s
Yeah.
who put all their stock away for whatever reason and stopped trading.
Right.
You dream of finding
I've
those
had
caches
many a
of,
dream about
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you do find them there. Like,
Yeah.
it does happen, but I think there's just so many more people looking for them in odd parts of the world and talking to people about it that
Yeah.
it's
And also,
gotten
people
harder.
know what things are worth now too. Like beforehand, you'd go to a store, or an old store in the middle of nowhere, and they didn't know what they had.
Right.
Where now they can look it up online and see these crazy prices and think it's worth that. So
Right.
it's a lot harder to find those sort of.
And I think the flip side of that is like, as well as kind of collectors knowing the value of items, is that fashion houses and fashion brands themselves know the value of their archives. So the example of Ray now saying that's it, no more, is, and it's something that, like the McQueen archive, or like, the Gucci's got its own museum. So even these fashion houses are aware of the value of heritage, and so that they're about kind of securing that for
So
themselves.
recent.
Yeah.
Before,
Yeah,
like,
which-
so many weren't even keeping archives.
Absolutely, and that's
They
kind of
weren't
ruined
keeping
it
archives.
for the collectors. The collectors that are working on smaller budgets, is that even the corporations know that their product's going to be worth 3 or 4 times as much as soon as it leaves the door. So, and they don't allow anyone, the real people, to access those products anymore. It just goes out into the atmosphere, and the community gets a bit lost because of the resale value
Yeah.
of things.
I think fashion was very much about looking forward and being obsessed with the new season,
Yeah.
the new thing, and designers themselves even like like degraded the value of their past collections in favor of selling their new collections.
Right.
But I think the speed of release now has meant that consumers themselves are actually like holding back on that process and then wanting to find the older pieces and still valuing them. And that's why brands are starting to look back at their archives or lock up their archives in that way from sale.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the release schedules are changing. I think that's why like seasonal runways where you wait 6 months for it to be available in stores is dying as well, because people want it now, but they want the old stuff as well. They want the new stuff. It's losing its place in time. It's becoming like everyone wants everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it would be dependent on collection and designer so much now as well, because that seems to be changing all of the time. New designers for brands and people wanting.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's
just
crazy.
with storage as well, like how do you guys keep your collections as investments? Like what is the process with that?
I think moisture and bugs are the enemy
Yeah.
of fashion.
Is there like a specific process to that, or is it just?
Well,
'cause
lots.
I know, sorry, you were just mentioning
I
how.
have the ideal. So we
Well,
have, you know, climate-controlled
Can we,
storage. We have, you know,
use yours?
acid-free boxes. We have, you know, it's kept away from heat, light. We've got pest control
Yep.
systems in place. But you know, like that's why, and we have not unlimited storage spaces, but we have big storage spaces.
Yeah.
So kind of not the best example for the home collector.
Right.
But,
I think as
Yeah.
a
It's
personal
just a
collector,
matter of Ziploc and keeping everything in an airtight bag. If it's clothing,
Yeah.
shoes are a really tough one. Shoes perish.
you've got to go through the process of losing a pair of shoes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you've got to have a pair of like Nikes or Jordans, like have the sole fall off
Yeah.
while you're walking along
Right.
to really appreciate how much you have to look
There
after
is
old clothing.
businesses
that
now
happen
that
for you?
resole shoes, so you get, because they keep bringing out the old Jordans, your original shoe can get the sole from the new shoe and they re-glue them. So there's a whole business out there of being able to do that. But shoes are a terrible investment. You keep them.
Sorry.
Sorry, but like, oh, don't worry, I bought too many. And it's just wear all your shoes, or if you are collecting them, move them on within 5 years, because
Yeah.
they've only got a 10-year lifespan.
Yeah, there's crazy things like Jazz, like a guy that works
Oh,
for
yeah.
Nike. He has like a temperature-controlled room, like with all his shoes in it to keep a lower temperature, so like the air bubble doesn't burst on like a hot day and all these.
Like in
crazy
his
shit.
house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like-
But he works at Nike, so that's fine.
Ah, okay.
They're like new cars. They
It's not
lose
that
all their
weird.
value as soon as they're put on their feet.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other problem too. So a lot of collectors won't wear their products. I like to wear everything.
Yeah.
I love it.
You've got to
Like,
have lost a few pairs to really
Yeah.
switch that. That happened to me as well.
Yeah, you've got to appreciate it. Actually wearing, especially shoes, if you wear them, they will last longer.
Yeah.
Because the foam becomes sort of more stretched. It can last longer. Where if you leave them dead stock, they tend to crumble because they've never been creased
Right.
or worn. But yeah, we all went through a horrible stage there of losing shoes. Like so many. You know, and they were worth, you know, the old Nikes were worth, you know, thousands of dollars or $1,000, and then they became $150
Yeah.
Even now,
overnight.
you buy a pair of shoes from like 06 now, and you'll kind of be like, you get them in the mail, and then you kind of put them on, you'll check the weather, and it'll be like 30 degrees
Yeah.
out. And you're
Walking like this.
"Whoa." Yeah, it's sort of like big moment of like weird tension.
Oh, the
Yeah.
worst. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, it gives me
So,
anxiety.
I've sort of stopped collecting shoes because I got burnt. Not burnt, but just you just can't wear them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's became a bit of a. Clothing's a lot better than toys,
Yeah.
sculptures and art. Yeah, much better.
Yeah, you've got to wear what you
Yeah,
love.
yeah,
That's why we
absolutely.
buy clothes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, you've got to wear it, or use it, or appreciate it,
Use it or lose
or
it.
hang it.
Yeah, exhibit it.
Exactly.
Exhibit it.
Just sort of on an end note, do you guys have any advice for anyone wanting to get into this, or any last words of wisdom?
I think everyone said it, but literally just buy what you like. Like, I can't stress that enough, because it's just like, there's so many things, like, you know, like I'll do it too. I'll go on my Instagram Explore page and I'll be like, whoa, cool, I want that. And then like 5 minutes later, I'll be like, no, I don't really. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's,
Yeah.
there's so many things telling you what's cool.
Yeah.
Do
So
your
many
research.
there's
Like,
so many things telling you what to buy and telling you what's hot and telling you
Totally.
what you should like.
Yeah.
And like, I feel like you should just kind of like ignore the noise. And if you love something and you truly love it, then by all means go in. But I feel like it does take, especially now, a bit more time to realize what you actually want and what you actually do not want. Because
Yeah.
I think I speak for everyone here when I've got a fucking ton of shit, which I just wish I never bought.
Yeah, like just do your research. If you start feeling like you're getting into something, find people. There's people online, and if you're passionate about something, they'll be more than happy to talk to you about it and just pick their brains and learn the history and then you'll find out what you want. Otherwise, you'll end up buying things that you don't need, and then you'll end up realizing later and having regrets that you bought that when you really wanted that.
Yeah.
So it's best to lay low for and just research and just talk to people.
Yeah.
Like, there's
So
a whole
true.
community out there and if you're real and you're genuine about it, people will talk to you about it. Like we love talking about it if you're genuine, and even if it's something we've spoken about a million times before, if it's some young kid and I can tell, that was me. I used to be that kid. I'll talk to you about it. Yeah. So that's probably the best way, is just to learn if you're passionate, don't consume straight away. Just learn, and then eventually you'll work out exactly what you want, and that usually is the more valuable item.
You'll develop your eye, basically, and the tastes.
Yeah.
That comes with all that research and
Absolutely.
watching.
Yeah,
Yeah.
trusting what you like before you check how other people look at you for liking that
Totally.
thing is really important, I think. Yeah.
Cool. We might open up the floor to any questions from anyone, if anyone has anything to ask. Yeah.
I'll get you guys off the hook. The irony
you'd have a good one.
is that, a tapestry would be worth more than any item of fashion in our collection. Like, it's just, it's a funny thing, people, or the other example would be that if somebody has worn something, for example, Audrey Hepburn's Breakfast at Tiffany's black dress was the most expensive item of clothing that ever sold. I think that was 4 years ago, and it sold for like over $1 million. So it's kind of like value is really subjective.
Yeah.
I know I've come across vintage t-shirts worth in the thousands, 5,000 more dollars, but I actually don't think we've let any of them go. I think they've all gone into my or my partner's personal wardrobe to be like enjoyed as well.
But individually, have you guys ever just spent heaps
Not
of money?
spend, but they become like the most expensive items for me are only in like the 2,000.
Right.
But I've got items that are now worth 40,000. Like especially Cause, like his figurines and prints and all of Cause's stuff's skyrocketed in price. So that's probably the most expensive things that I own. But managed.
And their clothing?
No, they're toys, like
Toys,
vinyl toys or metal
Yeah.
toys that he's made
Right.
limited runs of.
And
like,
people will spend that.
huge money on them,
Yeah. Crazy.
It really is.
Yeah. Well,
Were there any
Yeah.
more questions? No?
Yep. For sure. Yep. Totally. I'd say for me, 2007 was the best year ever. 2007, things were just going crazy. It was like amazing collabs. It was still like an underground scene. There was just really interesting things happen. And then probably around 2010, that's when everything went online. Like stores, Supreme bought an online store, and quantities went up through the roof. Like they started producing more, so prices went like that. Anything sort of 2010 on, it's just not worth as much. So I'd say anything pre-2010 for what I collect is where the money is. Yeah.
Oh, Danny, yeah. Uh, we do have a small component of, I guess, streetwear in the form of, sneakers, but it's not an area that we represent in great depth. So, and for us, there's no year where things drop off because I'm still collecting garments from the 18th century. So it's, but yeah.
Is there a particular year for you?
Not always. Like, I don't want to misrepresent what I do. I guess it's just a sort of drawing attention to the sort of breadth of collecting because it's quite different. But, like last year we bought a Dior couture dress in January and it was on display in July of the same year. So we're very much attuned to what's going on, seasonally in terms of fashion. And I guess the other thing I should say is it's not just international. I don't want to misrepresent what we do. We're actually very heavily invested in Australian fashion, and that's been, a constant since the 80s. The curator then was collecting, garments from Melbourne designers, that were made that same year. And so we do have lots of great relationships with, contemporaries like Romance Was Born, for example, or Dion Lee or Ellery or whoever. So it is, so we're constantly building the collection just in very different ways. And that's what I was trying to say before about having that radar. We're knowing how that work that you see fits in, whether it's a historical work and you think, great, we don't have one of those. We don't have a Yves Saint Laurent smoking tuxedo, and if it comes up, let's grab it. But also, like, what is the fashion moment now? What is fashion trying to say? For example, I guess topically, there's a lot of chatter about sustainability in fashion and designers that are doing interesting things there. So that's obviously an area going forward that we would look to see who represents that best as a movement. So, yeah.
Just hoard everything. Just don't
Yeah.
sell anything.
Yeah.
You never know. You don't.
Cool.
Australian ones? Have you got any Australian ones that you like? Well, obviously.
Yeah, Saints side.
Well, I've got a few. Like it's probably just friends that my mates that make clothing. Like I've got a mate in Melbourne for the homies. He's been around since day one. He just makes really cool. He makes denim to jackets to t-shirts, and he stayed true to himself. And just little brands like that. Obviously, Perks and Mini Pam in Melbourne as well. They're an awesome brand. They've stayed true to themselves.
Kind of goes back to what you were saying about just community, I guess, because I used to work at a boutique called Half Sleeve, and I guess all the brands I wore were from there, like Senior Romantics and yeah, for the homies and stuff like that, and all these guys that ran these brands eventually became friends. And like that's how I met Simon too. So
even
supply,
supply store, like even just their home the stuff that they bring out themselves is cool. Like just anyone that's that's doing something that's genuine. Yeah, for sure.
Garbage TV.
Yep.
I rate.
Yep.
And they're very much part of the PAM family from them. But I think Garbage TV are one of my favourite streetwear brands in Australia.
They've also evolved massively internationally as well,
Yeah.
those kind of ones.
Yeah, they
Garbage.
have.
I think Australia is very much an incubator for some brands like that
Yeah.
translate well overseas.
Hello.
Otto? Yeah. Just from the internet, to be honest. Just looking up, because looking up his videos. I don't even remember. Actually, I really don't. Yeah. Yeah, like, yeah, if, basically, like, I won't sell anything that I don't want to sell. Like, I'm at the stage now where I buy specifically for the store and then separately for my collection. So that's how I do it.
Will .com become a museum eventually?
It's already, like,
It's-
I think I've got the biggest collection in
Yeah.
the world.
It's always a good idea when you're a collector, if you can buy more than one of something and you've got the opportunity, buy
Yeah.
3.
Do it,
One
yeah.
for now, one to sell, one just to hide and forget about. Like, it's always, if you've got the
Except shoes.
opportunity, just buy much stuff as you can, because it will help you trade. Because eventually, you know, you might not be able to afford something and then your items will be worth more money, and then you'll have something that you can swap. So it is always worth buying multiples.
Yep.
Do you think you would ever, with your personal collection, will you sell it, or what will you do with it? You're going to give it,
No, like, in the long term,
end up in a,
retired and whatever, but I just want to have the best collection. Like,
Yeah.
that's the goal. I don't care about.
and you do? You have the largest?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know anyone who's got a bigger one, but
Yeah.
yeah, I just want to have as many runway looks as possible. I want them all. So,
Yeah.
like, that's the goal.
It's a sickness.
Yeah, it's a sickness. It is.
Yeah.
It's a mental condition.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great.
Cool, I think we're wrapping up now. Sorry, okay, last question.
Definitely.
Good question. No, like I don't really enjoy the industry, like the politics of it. I'd prefer to just be the guy that's out there enjoying what they're doing. Like, I've got a total appreciation for it, but no, never wanted to be in it.
I definitely still design a lot as part of my practice. Not necessarily clothing, across a lot of like installation work and things like that, sort of adjacent to fashion, I think, and that's part of it for
Yep.
us. It's not just collecting.
Cool, thank you guys so much for coming today and your questions, and just want to say a big thank you to everyone. You guys did an awesome job.